Joe, thank you for joining me. It's great to see you virtually, but I'm obviously really excited to meet you in person when you head up this way into Scotland in Dunbar at the start of June with the Wave Project. How's the tour going? How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, and the tour's going well. We've done 4 or 5 dates so far, um, and there's been some really good audience responses to them. I mean, I think we really wanted to get the message out there about what the Wave Project is doing and how we're helping people, um, because I think. A lot of people know that we take young people surfing, but don't necessarily understand the rationale or the theory of change behind some of the sessions we run. So we're keen to get out there and get the message out to people particularly in the communities where we deliver projects.
And the Wave Project itself, it's something I'm familiar with. Obviously, I follow the social profiles. My wife's involved with surfing. I try to surf, so I'm very aware of what you guys are doing. But can you just take us back a little bit to obviously when you founded the organization, what the inspiration was, and take us back to the sort of the start of the journey?
Well, I think the foundation of the charity and the project was quite intuitive, really. I mean, um, excuse me, I just had the sort of sense that uh, surfing was fun. Children liked being outside. It seemed to lift their mood. So could we kind of bring some of this together in a structured way to help improve well-being and emotional well-being and mental health and self-regulation, those kind of things. Um, so the first pilot scheme was really just an experiment. It was a pilot scheme funded by the NHS down here in Cornwall. And actually we found some really quite strikingly good results from it. And I think that was partly because the young people who took part, they were all NHS referrals from different parts of the NHS, different services. So they'd all been quite used to professionals sort of engaging with them, asking them questions about themselves, um, doing assessments, people trying to get to the bottom of what their problems were, in inverted commas. So to be referred to something like this, which was from the NHS, but where we didn't ask them any of that. We weren't talking to them about, what they felt their problems were or what the causes were for them. We just were like, hey, let's go surfing. Let's just have a bit of fun. Um, and it was just like a joyful experience for them. There was no pressure on them to have to do anything really. They weren't there to kind of achieve anything. And that kind of, low intensity, quite calm and relaxed approach really helped them. And we saw, and the project was evaluated by an NHS psychologist, and she was really quite struck with just the improvement that they made in a short time around their emotional resilience, their confidence, how they interacted and bonded with each other as well as a group. And so, yeah, that was the starting point, and we thought, hey, there's something in this. Let's pursue it a bit further.
So was that from the get-go when you established the charity that you were getting referrals from doctors and
Yeah,
NHS? Because
yeah.
that's so good to hear. But even these days, you still hear that. I look at it, and pills and medicine and things are quite readily still handed out. When actually people just getting outside in the great outdoors, it's something that maybe isn't pushed enough. But you were getting that sort of recommendation very early on in the setup.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the point of the project. It was meant to be, an NHS funded therapeutic course in the sea. So, and it's quite unique at the time. This is why it had, um, quite a lot of media attention, even from the very get-go. The pilot scheme was featured in, the national press and the BBC and stuff, because I think it was just such an unusual idea. But what was really striking was just the results of it, and how much that seemed to really help these young people. And that's kind of what really drove the charity forward. That was the outcomes that this was achieving for them.
And when was it? When did you form the charity?
So that pilot scheme was back in 2010, so 13 years ago.
Right.
Um, Funnily enough, the NHS funding actually fell away pretty shortly after the pilot scheme, because you may remember there was a change of government in 2010, and a new government came in saying that they wanted to reform the NHS. Some of us with long memories will remember how they promised not to do that in the election, but let's not go there. But anyway, they started reorganizing it, and so that led to projects like ours being defunded. So this was a bit of a disaster for the Wave project. You know, we just got this NHS pilot going. It done really well, fantastic results, really exciting. Commissioners loved it, and they said, well, we can't, unfortunately, we can't fund it. So for me, you know, I remember sitting there. I remember the phone call actually I got with the commissioners when they told me that, being so disappointed, because, you know, it's just been such an exciting project to be part of. And I actually made a decision right there and then, said, you know, we absolutely have to keep this going somehow, because, you know, these children really benefited from this. It's a really simple intervention, but they really, you know, the outcomes are really clear. So that's when I formed what was initially a community interest company, which was formed in January 2011. And I started to try and raise funds for it. And the first people to come along and give us a grant was BBC Children in Need, who gave us a grant for £10,000, which came in around May that year. And it was a bit of a lifeline, really, because for me, I was almost getting to the point where I'd kind of given up hope a bit, really, that this project would ever get refunded. We got this £10,000 grant from Children in Need, and that was the kind of lifeline, really. That was the sort of spark that rekindled the whole project again. And so that year we were able to work with another 40 children, did another evaluation, and again the results are really fantastic. And these 40 children just had the most amazing time. And, you know, there's just really clear evidence that you know, that they were just really benefiting from this really simple surfing intervention.
At that time, when those kids are getting referred to you, was there a common theme of what the kids were going through, whether it be anxiety or difficulties at home? What were the sort of first referrals that you were taking on your courses and helping with?
Well, the first pilot scheme, there was 20 children, and they were all NHS referrals. So they all had some diagnosable mental health condition. In the second phase, with the Children in Need funding, we were able to broaden it out a bit more and take referrals from social services as well. So we had a mix of mental health and social care referrals. So it was a mixture of children who, in some cases, had disabilities. Some of them had social problems, you know, family breakdown, problems at home. We worked with children who had conditions like fetal alcohol syndrome, children who were being bullied at school, as well as young people with, you know, classic mental health issues, self-harm, even like things like schizophrenia and bipolar, and some more kind of severe conditions on the more severe end of the spectrum, and quite a few children with autism and neurodisabilities as well. So yeah, quite a big range. And all the advice was to, at that time, not to mix these groups. You know, you shouldn't have, you know, mixed groups of different conditions. But we just ignored that, really, to be honest, and just shoved them all together in one, you know, mixed group. Partly just for practical reasons. If we had because we were operating across the whole of Cornwall in 5 different locations. If I had a child referred from North Cornwall, that might be, you know, an hour's drive from West Cornwall, where we had another project. So I didn't really want to kind of make them drive all that way just so we could keep those kind of groups artificially together.
Yeah.
funnily enough, we actually found that mixing the groups had an unexpectedly positive effect. Because I think there was somewhere in these kids that they kind of realized that actually they were with these other children. They all had challenges of one sort or another, but they kind of worked out that they could sort of see that there was other children who had different challenges to their own. So they could sort of see that, well, I've got all of these issues. These are the things I'm worrying about, but I can see that you've got different issues, and your issues aren't the same as my issues. And it almost seemed to kind of break down some of that stigma and some of the barriers um, for these kids making friends with each other. And ultimately, friendships are the holy grail in terms of improving young people's mental health and well-being. The more friendships they have, the better they do.
And maybe I'm assuming wrongly here. Getting kids to go in the sea, obviously wetsuits on and things like that. There's challenges before you even get them in the water, let alone get them on a surfboard. But because the kids are being taken into a safe space, now it might be they might think it's risky or dangerous in the water. They might fall off the board or um, get covered by a massive wave, but they're surrounded by, I'm right in saying it's volunteers and people that care for them, and they can enjoy themselves. They can have fun, which must be such a relief to them to get into that space when they're maybe coming from a broken home. Or I was thinking you put a post out, I think today or the other day, about a little boy who had been in his home for over a year looking after his mum through COVID, and how many kids have been affected through COVID, and that now we're coming out at the other side of it, and getting in the water and being in the great outdoors is just so beneficial for them because you've created that safe space.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely describing our theory of change. That whole sense of in that location, I'll feel okay because basically the people there, will look after me. I won't have anyone putting pressure on me. I won't have to do anything I don't want to do, and hopefully it'll be fun. But even if it's not fun, that's okay because I can just reach out and someone will help me.
Yeah.
That's the exact atmosphere we're trying to create for them because then that unlocks their anxiety a bit. And you're right that, a lot of the kids we work with, struggle just to get out of the house in the morning sometimes because they just don't know what's out there. So by creating, in their minds, an idea that I'll be safe here, and that starts even from before we've met them. I realized that even when we wrote to these kids just to invite them onto the course, a boring, NHS style letter saying, you have been referred to this intervention, here's the date, that's not going to engage a child, So we redid it. We wrote to the child. So if the child was, say, called Fred, we'd say, hey, Fred, we're really looking forward to taking you surfing. Here's a picture of the beach you're coming to. My name's Joe, and I'm going to be your surf mentor. Or, we're going to have loads of fun together. If you're worried about anything, you can talk to me. Here's my number. So we tried to change the whole tone of that letter that went out to them in the first place, so that they got that letter. And first of all, it was a letter to them. I mean, children don't get a letter very often through the post. It's something interesting.
Yeah.
And they opened it and they were like, okay, so they could identify where the beach was. They could see a picture of it, and they knew who I was. And already they had a bit of a connection and a link with this place they were going, and they felt a bit safer. And then when they got there, the mentors who were there, they were all volunteers, were trained to be just super welcoming. I would always say to them, don't leave one of these children standing around on their own because, looking anxious. You've got to go and talk to them and engage with them and just ask them about their day. And so it's just as if you were welcoming a mate to a surf, or meeting a friend for a drink or something, like, or a coffee,
Yeah.
that kind of atmosphere. It's like, hey, Nashy, how are you? How's your trip down here?
Yeah.
How's things today?
Engage with them. Yeah. Engage with
Yeah,
them.
simply engage with them. And so some of these details were really just being missed in kind of conventional services, but just by thinking about the whole person and how, and the crucial thing was looking at it from their point of view. How are they going to be feeling when they get up in the morning thinking about going surfing?
Hmm.
Well, they're probably going to be quite worried, aren't they? That it's quite stressful going to a new place, having to get in the car, thinking about this slightly unusual activity you're going to be doing. They might be excited or they might be quite anxious. So whatever their condition or whatever was, in inverted commas, wrong with them, the point was that they'd be feeling a bit anxious. And our job was just simply to reassure them that they didn't need to feel anxious. They were in control, really. They could tell us what they wanted to do, and we do it. And this diffuses their anxiety. And as the session wears on, their confidence grows, and they actually think, "Well, do you know what? I might actually have a go at this. I might try and get out there and get on that board and get in the water and have a little splash about and a little play and a bit of a go because I'm not being pushed into anything." And then all of that leading up to the point where hopefully they eventually catch a wave, whether they pop up or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Point is, they're on that wave. That's the kind of a goal achieved, and that's massive. And then, all of the group, all of the volunteers, and maybe even some of the other kids, they get a round of applause as though this is the best thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
And yeah, for those kids, that's what is flipping the switch in their minds about their whole life, about how they see their life.
Do you see, as a father of three, I'm sitting listening to you and things like that. I don't know if I've ever thought about depression or anxiety in my kids, and maybe I'm fortunate in that regard, or maybe that's obviously a good thing. Do you get resistance from some parents sometimes when if they've been referred because they think, well, hold on, I don't believe that's wrong with my child, or is it gone beyond that stage when they get to you because the parents know they've gone to the doctors and then they get referred? I'm just thinking that some parents might be really protective, and that you might have challenges on that side of it for parents to let their children go into this new territory that they'll be worrying about them and thinking maybe they don't need this help.
Yeah, no, right. Well, that's a really good question. First of all of our children are referred, so like they have to be referred by someone professionally.
Yeah.
So they would have already had to seek some kind of help
Okay.
from someone, but it doesn't have to be a medical referral. It could be a teacher or a Senko in a school. A social worker, could be someone else that's working with that family.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing to say. But I think it's a really good question about. I think you're right. A lot of parents don't want to sort of think of there being something wrong with their child. That's a completely natural thing to think. And look, I mean, I'm someone who's like lectured on like ADHD in children. I'm a parent myself. Lo and behold, my own son got diagnosed with ADHD. And something I was quite resistant to myself. So I completely understand that. I thought I knew about ADHD.
What do you why were you resistant? Like, can I go in there and
Well, I think
because you didn't think he had ADHD, or you just didn't want to accept it, or
I didn't want to accept it. Yeah, yeah. I don't mind admitting that. I was too proud to accept it. Especially being someone who ran a charity that supported children with ADHD. But actually, when he got the diagnosis, and it's just really clear in his case that there was a problem. There's problems in school all through his primary school, and I now regret not pushing harder for a diagnosis. And it was a stupid mistake, but I can make that mistake just like any other parent. I think you're blinkered when it comes to your own children.
yeah, and that's
So look, I completely get any
yeah,
parent's anxiety over that sort of thing. I was worried about medication. My son's now on medication at school, and he's doing so much better because of his diagnosis. So actually, I think, and he has also done the Wave project, which he really enjoyed. So I think I would say to parents who are worried about this sort of stuff, try not to worry. It's better to get help, and than be trying to battle these things alone. And it's a lonely journey. And I've been there on that side of the fence as well. I know what it's like to deal with the challenges of having a child who, is neurodiverse and doesn't see the world the same way everyone else. I remember my son saying to me once before his diagnosis, he said, "Dad, I think I see the world differently to other people." And it was only really when he said that I thought, right, you're saying that to me, and I know that that means something. And I couldn't, I resisted almost putting the two things together. I resisted it for too long, but it was just, eventually, yeah, we got a diagnosis, and
How old was
he's
he
doing it better
when he
now.
said that? How old is he when he said that? When he sort
I
of
think he was about 10,
really?
something like that. And he got diagnosed at the age of 11.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting just because you are listening, sitting here, as I said, thinking about my kids and how do you identify? And I suppose when you get to that stage when a teacher starts to sort of notice patterns, or people that are around the kids regularly start to notice things, it's making that commitment to say that, look, the Wave Project, other things, initiatives are out there. The kids can get help. There are things that are set up like what you've created to help the kids, to let them know that
Yeah,
they're not alone, to let them know that they can get help, they can go to a completely different environment and thrive. It's so important.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing. It's about other people. In my son's case, I think the diagnosis helped other people understand his behavior,
Hmm.
and I think that was the key difference really for him. He didn't actually change as a person. And, we love him for who he is, and he's a lovely kid. And, I suppose we just worried about what that diagnosis might mean for him. But actually, I think people these days understand that there are these kind of conditions out there, and it's okay to have them. And I remember him saying to me, "Look, Dad, I don't mind if I've got ADHD." I was really proud of him when he said that. Um, and actually, it didn't really bother him, which is why I don't really mind talking about it, because I know he doesn't really mind. Um, but so yeah, I mean, but I think that for us as a charity with the Wave Project, we don't really look at diagnoses anyway. We're kind of looking at the child. If a child's been referred to us by someone who thinks that this might help them, then we'll help them.
Yeah.
It's not our job to sort of judge whether or not they deserve that help or they need it. It's professionals working with a child who can make that assessment, make the referral, and then we'll work with those children as best we can. And they all go out together, and yeah, it's all okay. Your diagnosis doesn't matter when you're in the water. It's about surfing, and
The water's a bit of a leveler, is it? Because everyone's getting smashed by the same waves. Everyone's got the same cold feeling when it touches your toes and all these sorts of things. And if someone's not going in, but they see someone else just going that wee bit further, it might just spur them on. So yeah, I get the sort of the community side of it, the sort of getting the kids together and letting them see others push themselves. Lead by example.
absolutely, yeah, I think that's right. I think it is a leveler in every sense. I mean, we're all physically at the same level in the water.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you have the same waves to catch, and everyone falls off a bit, and it's very unusual to get a child who would go in and sort of smash it straight away and be popping up, and occasionally it happens, but most of the time they find it quite difficult at first.
Yeah.
And so actually it becomes a bit of a laugh. It's not anything to take too seriously. And you've got your mentor there as well, just to kind of give you a bit of encouragement. And I think the other thing for the kids we work with, just when they're ready to come out or they've had enough, they can come out. There's no pressure on them to have to achieve anything other than what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's important, letting them know that they've got the control of the timescale. That they don't have to. It's
Yeah,
not a 3 hour session. You don't get out until you finished it. They've got
but they have control of the whole session, really.
okay.
If they want to come out for a bit and make sandcastles on the beach or just talk, or they can. They want to come out and get changed, they can. If they don't want to go in, they don't have to.
Yeah.
And we really try and reduce or completely eliminate that whole sense of anything being a failure. Like if you don't want to go in, that's cool, don't go in. There's no, why make yourself do something you don't want to do? Like it's just come do whatever you want to do. It's your session. You do what you want with it. And that's true of life as well. It's your life. You do what you want with it.
Yeah.
It's not our job to make you do stuff. It's your job to decide what you want to do. And it's about trying to reframe the way they see their life a bit through the session. It's a lens really into their wider life.
Yeah. And
Does that
on
make
this
sense?
tour, we touched on the tour, obviously you're mid-tour and you're on tour with Saltrock. How's it been with the
Yeah,
Saltrock family? I know them very well. The team down there, they've been very kind to my family. We love all the adventures and bits and pieces we do with them. But you've been on the road and you've been traveling. You said the responses so far from
yeah.
the tour have been great.
Yeah, they're a lovely team at Saltrock, and they've been really kind and really helpful and supportive with this tour. Um, I remember in the first one we did in North Devon, which is in their sort of flagship store in Braunton. I brought this screen along that I was going to stick in the middle of the shop and a projector, and we put up this projector and screen. And back in the office when we set it up, this screen and projector looked absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when we transported it into this big store, it just looked really tiny. And bless her, uh, Kate, who's the head of marketing at Saltrock, who lives in the area, dashed off. She managed to source in the space of about an hour a whole new big screen, a new projector, and a speaker, which she kind of dashed around and put together. So by the time people arrived, we had this really fantastic setup, but it'd all been like pulled together in the space of about an hour, just before people had rocked up. And next thing you know, the store was full of people, and I was doing my talks. I was just super impressed with how how unflappable they all were. But I mean, yeah, they've been great, and really promoted it. Really tried to get the word out there to their customers and their the people who support Saltrock, and let them know. It's a really great partnership. They're all about families and the seaside and the whole surf culture around the sea and the beach, and so are we. And our focus on mental health is quite light touch, and we're a bit like a family as well, and the Wave Project. So it's yeah, it works really well, and we're really pleased to be working with them. In terms of the talks themselves, I mean, people seem to have, you know, responded quite well from what I can see. No one's told me they really hated my talk or anything, so
There's been no
that's good, I
hecklers,
guess.
no hecklers
Um,
yet.
yeah, no eggs thrown at me or people storming out or like, um, I remember actually I did a talk in Brighton this week, and I was driving back and I was listening to a podcast about Frank Zappa, the musician. I didn't know this, but apparently he was doing a show once, and someone jumped up on stage and sort of rugby tackled him into the stands, and ended up getting quite seriously injured. He was in hospital in a wheelchair for nearly a year after that. So I'm pleased to say nothing like that's ever happened to me at one of these talks. So that's I think that's a bit of a
I
puts
think
things into perspective.
I think you're
Yeah.
talking. You're in a safe space. You're in a safe space when you're talking. You've got good people around you, and obviously, I think I was speaking to Kate today. I think there's still a few spaces for up here in Dunbar where I'm going to meet you and bring my family along. What can we expect? Is this the is it the story of the Wave project that you tell, and is it it's kind of what we've discussed, what you'll be doing on stage?
Yeah, it's along the lines of what we've discussed. I mean, I'm going to be going into a bit more detail about some of the science behind it. The rationale, how we created our theory of change. Because I think a lot of people, like I said at the beginning, they understand the Wave Project's about surfing. It's about, it's fun and it puts smiles on kids' faces, and I think people instinctively get that, but they perhaps don't understand always just quite how in tune what we do is with the current trends around like positive psychology and neuroscience, and even psychiatry is moving in this direction of becoming much more about being outside, peer learning, all of these kind of things, connecting with others. and it's moving away, I think, from the kind of 20th century psychiatric model of like, trying to kind of, imprison people for their own safety and make them do stuff. It's much more about trying to empower these individuals, especially children. And I also want to say a bit about the importance of tackling mental health, for children at a young age. That's where we can really make a difference. There's loads of evidence now to suggest that, it's children where the battle against mental illness can really be won. If we turn their own thinking about themselves around, at a young age, then they're much less likely to have serious mental health problems later on. And those people who only really end up having a crisis in adulthood, it's much harder for them to actually overcome some of those problems. So yeah, we really want to transform mental health. That's our goal as a charity, and be part of that whole movement.
And a lot of it, you must see that some of the kids that do battle anxiety or depression, do you see enough help happening with the parents? Because there must be a lot of influence coming from parents or guardians that the stress that these kids are going through maybe it does start at home, or maybe it is anxiety about exams or something. I know you deal with kids with extremely serious situations and serious conditions, but sort of starting at home to sort of get to the source of why these children are battling what they are battling. Because as parents, as I said, we've touched on it, and I'm going back to it here, is us identifying that our child might need help. We've got to identify in ourselves that it might be us that's causing it.
Well, no, look, I think you've got to be a little bit careful here, because I think in my experience, and I'm not an expert on parenting or anything, but like, do you know what? I've seen parents who can be incredibly overprotective of their children. I've seen parents who are almost quite laissez-faire and don't really seem to kind of show much interest in their children. And all these children end up with different challenges, but actually, I don't think there's a formula that, that is the correct type of parenting. And actually, in my experience, I think most parents really want their children to do well. They are doing their best to try and help them. They try and make the right decisions for them. They try and do what they can do to help them. So, and I think a lot of parents feel incredibly guilty that they're not doing enough for their kids, that they should be doing more, but they don't know what else to do. So I don't actually think, I think we're going off down the wrong path. This is my personal view, right? Not necessarily anything to do with the Wave Project's research, but my personal view is that you've got to be quite careful about layering too much on parents. But I think there's something about trying to take pressure off these kids a little bit more, both at home and at school and in the environments they're in. They're under immense pressure all the time at the moment. Sometimes parents are trying really hard to help them do well, and they can be too pushy. Other times parents just need a bit of love from their mum and dad and don't get it. Sometimes kids are just being driven too hard at school. Other times they need to be stretched a bit more. Sometimes they feel like they're under pressure from their peer group and they want friends and can't find them, or that they feel like if they don't do the right thing, their friends will turn their back on them. All these things put them under a lot of pressure. And so I think what we can do is try and create spaces where they don't feel under pressure, places where they just can go, either virtually or in the real world, at home, at school, outside school, where there's just little oases of calm, little enclaves where everything in that space is pressure free. No pressure on them. Don't have to conform. Don't have to be something they're not. Doesn't matter what they say about themselves or other people. That's all okay. They can't fail. And if we can create those spaces, that's massive for these kids. And they can then sometimes use that as a sort of ladder to kind of climb out of the other challenges they have. I've seen this happen time and time again. So yeah, more intervention. I don't think so. We need lots more of the Wave Project necessarily, but I think we need more places where these children can just be themselves and accepted for who they are. And if those spaces exist, let's promote them more. That would be my
Absolutely. Absolutely.
remedy.
No, absolutely, and I agree. And just, I won't keep you too much longer, but also social media. Do you see children of an age where maybe, I don't know, 10 and above, when a mobile phone comes into their world and social media and people, friends, situations, people being able to get to them virtually, causing more problems, and kids going into stressful situations and worrying about other people's opinions, because it's not just verbally face to face in school, it's through social media messages and Facebook and all these sorts of things. Is there
Yeah,
an
absolutely. I
issue?
mean, look, absolutely. I think it's a massive problem. Um, and I think it's a problem in ways people don't necessarily always fully understand. I mean, I don't know whether you know this, but the little red dot, the pink dot on your kind of messaging system, there's like a bit of the brain that responds to, like, you know, when you get a kind of like, you get that sort of one message on Instagram or whatever, like, and um, you know, there's a lot of neuroscience in social media. They know exactly what they're doing in terms of just triggering that little hit of dopamine when, you know, you get that message. Oh gosh, something exciting's happened to me. Someone
Yeah,
likes me. I've got that validation that I desperately crave in my life, because I want to be loved, and here it is. There's that little dot tells me that someone loves me. You know, they know that, and um, you know, the same thing in computer games as well. The way that the computer games ratchets up the addictivity by giving you rewards, and
yeah,
so much of this stuff is, you know, mainlining into your reward system, into the brain's reward system, and it's addictive, and you need more and more of it. It's exactly like a drug addiction, exactly like it. I'm sorry to say. I sometimes think of it as almost being a bit like the opium wars in China, you know, in the 19th century, when people were getting more and more addicted to this stuff and not even realizing what it was doing to them, until suddenly everyone took a step back and thought, hang on a minute, we've got all these people sat around not doing anything all day,
yeah.
you know, and it's just ruining lives, and then they banned it. I don't want to get carried away here, but I just think we definitely need to understand better what's going on with this stuff. It's pretty dangerous in my opinion. So I think less of it is good. But I also understand, I've got 3 kids myself, 2 boys. They love, you know, they love their phones, they love playing games. I just would say that just limit it, and that's I think that you can have far too much of it. I mean, my kids aren't allowed to play any computer games at all during the week, you know, and my son's allowed his phone to communicate. He has a shut off time, um, you know, when the phone shuts down. He's not allowed to play games on there. At the weekend, they can play some games. That sounds really harsh parenting, but I just think
It's see, it sounds like
it's addictive.
you've got really good kids if they're if they're actually doing that, because you've cracked it there, because we've got a Switch in the house, Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, yeah, we
That
have
can
as well.
turn into a war between my 2
Yeah, it
boys.
can, of course, because it's very addictive,
Yeah,
and it can absolutely. And you know, gosh, you know, Fortnite. I mean, goodness me. And you've got to ask yourself, what is driving that behavior?
yeah.
Why are they getting so upset turning this stuff off? You know, computer games, this stuff should be fun, right?
I remember
You
it
know,
used to be when I used to play in FIFA and all the graphics were rubbish, and Super Mario.
yeah,
I was an only child, so
exactly. You know, in the old days when we were playing like Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever, you know,
oh,
those games, you could switch them off, couldn't you? You know, it wasn't that big a
yeah,
deal.
yeah. Whereas now
It's not like that now. They've nailed it in terms of knowing how to you know, addict these kids to this stuff. So I think you've got to be really strong, because I think kids will say, but everyone else plays it. I mean, I get that. You know, they all play Fortnite. They're in tears. My children, my son, everyone plays Fortnite. I'm the only one who's not allowed to play it. I'm like, don't care. You're not playing it. You know,
I know.
I'm sorry. And like, you know, because it's just. I mean, you know, look, a lot of parents might listen to this and say that's much too harsh, and I'd never do that. I'm not, you know, telling anyone what to do by any means. I'm just saying what we do. But that's just because, you know, I think I've got a bit of an understanding of what's going on, and I'm much better to go surfing, or try and balance it with, you know, bit of computer time with a bit of outdoor time or a bit of something else. It's got to
Negotiation, deals,
balance.
not bribery, but I mean, it's kind of like, come on, let's get out in the bikes this afternoon when you're knackered and your heart rate's been pumping. You can come back and have an hour on Mario Kart or
And
something like
also,
that.
I think quite clear rules as well, so that children know what's expected and what they can and can't do. And as soon as those rules become elastic, by by nagging, they can get away with more. You've got to think of it as quite an addictive thing, and would you give your child something that they were getting addicted to normally? And the answer is probably not. Or as soon as you realized it was addictive, you'd limit it,
Yeah,
or stop it. And that's the way I see computer games, even though it's hard to do. Any addiction's hard to break, isn't it? Any addiction.
absolutely.
And I think if there are some kids that do you know what, it just doesn't bother them if they can take it or leave it with computer games. They're not addicted to them, and for whatever reason their brains just don't get too bothered about it. I think then there's no problem. Don't worry about it. But I know with my two boys, if we let them, they would just play computer games all the time. They would not look up, and that's not good.
No,
they need to do other things. Their brains are growing and developing, and they need to be open to other experiences. So, and can I just say, these are all my personal opinions here, right? The Wave Project doesn't give out any advice like this to parents. We're not there to tell parents how to parent. So this is my personal opinion. I would just like to.
Joe, it's not coming across. Don't worry. I get that. Don't worry. It's not coming across that. I can relate to a lot of things you're saying. I can see when my kids, my boys, especially my daughter, isn't that interested in computer games at all. However, put her on YouTube watching how to bake a cake because she loves baking. Come back 10 minutes later, she's on something completely different because YouTube's just feeding her the next video, next video, next video.
Yeah.
And then she's down a rabbit hole, and then you say it's time to go. And sometimes she's like, no problem, let's go, what we're doing. Other times it'll be like, here comes the tantrum. And that's honest.
Yeah.
I know we're all going through it. It's hard to condition it. And does that then turn into the anxiety, the depression,
exactly, yeah,
that parents don't notice? We don't think they've got a problem. We can break it. I don't know. But
I think we've got to ask ourselves as a parent is this the atmosphere that I want my kids to grow up in? Where they're getting so upset by something that it's actually meaning that they don't want to do anything else, or it's just actually wrecking family life. And if it's not, then don't worry about it. But I think if it's getting to the point where they're getting upset, they're getting really tearful, they're really just unhappy because of this stuff, then you've got to ask yourself, is this good for them? That's the way I look at it anyway, with my family. And if it's not good for them, then you need to have that conversation and say, is this what you want? Do you want to be this upset all the time? And if not, what do we do about it? Engage them in, if they're old enough, engage them. The best outcome is one where they actually empower themselves to make a decision on it and say, do you know what, actually, I would rather just spend a bit of time with you, Dad, and have fun and do something fun rather than this arguing, and get away from it being a kind of, you will do what I tell you because I'm the parent type thing that never really gets you anywhere, I don't think so. But look, I'm no, as I just admitted in this interview, I'm no expert when it comes to getting it right as a parent. Goodness me, I mean, none of us are. We're all amateurs,
Joe, sometimes it's just good for a couple of dads to have a chat and realize
yeah, exactly.
We're going through similar things and we're at different stages, and we've all got challenges, and it's this parenthood isn't easy.
Let me tell you something. Parents are the world's most committed volunteers, right?
Yeah.
We don't get paid anything for it. We don't get much back from it, but we do it anyway. That's
well, Joe.
So
Joe, let's wrap this up because it's been a pleasure talking to you. I can't wait to meet you face to face, and you're going to meet my three kids in Dunbar when you come up, and I can't wait to see the Saltrock team will be up with you. So I'm looking forward to catching up with them as well. Joe, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Cheers.